Okay, we're on Sheviit Perek Zayin, Mishnah Zayin. Chapter 7, Mishnah 7. We're talking about when something is, whether something has Kedushat Sheviit or doesn't have Kedushat Sheviit. So we have a very interesting case here. Let's go back to my Word file. Here we are. Okay, the Mishnah is going to discuss two cases. This is rose petal perfume. Okay, both of these things are, so what they would do is they would take rose petals and they would stick them in, let's make it a little bigger, and they would stick them in olive oil. So now if I have olive oil, okay, from Kedushat Sheviit, or let's say the rose petals are Kedushat Sheviit, what determines whether the perfume has Kedushat Sheviit? And the very important thing, the relevance is, of course, do I have to do biur? Do I have to treat it with Kedushat Sheviit? I can anoint myself. That's the normal use of the oil. But do I have to get rid of it, Bisman biur? Does it have Kedushat Sheviit? Similarly, fruit wine. So this is a picture I found on the internet. You get the point. But let's say the cherries, in our case, in the Mishnah is going to be chuvim, carobs. But let's say the cherries are from the 6th year and the wine is the 7th year, or vice versa. That's the case in the Mishnah. Okay, so before we start, I made you a huge chart. Okay, that's just what I do. So let's say, the red are the obvious that the Mishnah didn't have to tell us. So in each case, I have the rose, the verid of the 6th year, olive oil, the oil of the 6th year. This is our first case. 7th year, 7th year, 8th year, 8th year. So the ones that are obvious are clear. 6th year and 6th year, no Kedushat Sheviit. Right? 6th year and 7th year to the oil, obviously it has Kedushat Sheviit. 6th year and 8th year, I mean, if I have roses from the 6th year and shemen from the 8th year, no Kedushat Sheviit to the oil. Great. 7th year olives, roses, 7th year shemen, obviously it does have. The same is true for the 8th year. 8th and 6th, no. 8th and 7th year shemen. Remember, the shemen always has Kedushat Sheviit. And then 8th and 8th, obviously, ain't Kedushat Sheviit. But what about 6th? If the verid is the 7th year, but the olive oil, if the oil is 6th year, but it has rose petals from the 7th year, the Shemitah year, or the olive oil is the 8th year, and the rose petals is from the 7th year, from the Shemitah year. As we're going to see, that's the first case in the Mishnah. With that in mind, we can understand our Mishnah. It says the Mishnah, vered chadash, okay, new rose. Shekavsho b'shemen yashan. Let's look at the Bartunura. Vered chadash shekavsho b'shemen yashan. Vered shel shvi'it. Shekavsho b'shemen shel shishit. 7th year rose in oil of the 6th year. Says the Mishnah. Let's read it again. So vered chadash, 7th year in oil of the 6th year. Yilaket et havered. What does that mean? That's what we see in our Mishnah. Vered chadash. This is 7th year, new. Shekavsho b'shemen yashan, 6th year oil. Yilaket et havered, meaning you can take out the rose petals. Yotzi et havered. This is my explanation. You take out the vered from the oil, and then ve'en l'shemen kedushat shvi'it. Okay, the shemen is shishit. It has flavor. It has tam, some tam from the vered, but the reason is, the commentaries explain, that a vered chadash, a new vered, is weak, and therefore it doesn't leave a strong tam. Okay, but let's go back to our Mishnah. V'yashan bechadash, but if I put yashan, i.e. 7th year rose petals in chadash and 8th year oil, chayav biur. Let's go back to our chart. Yashan bechadash chayav biur. Okay, even if I took the oil out of the rose petal out of the oil, yashan bechadash, i.e. 7th year into 8th year, then the shemen has kedusha. The reason they say is because the verid yashan, the old petals, if I leave rose petals and I let them age, are very strong. And no matter what I do, there are no ting tam in the shemen. And therefore, even though the shemen is the 8th year, the tam of the 7th year verid remains even if I take them out. And therefore, the oil itself, even though it came from the 8th year, has Kedushat Sheviit. That's our Mishnah. Let's read it again. Vered chadash shekavsho b'shemen yashan. If I have 7th year rose petals in 6th year oil, yilaket et havered. Take out the 7th year. They're newer, and they're not old. They're not as strong, and therefore the oil doesn't have Kedushat Sheviit. But v'yashan b'chadash, if I have old 7th year rose petals in new oil and 8th year oil, chayav biur. Next case, charuvim chadashim shekavshan b'yayin yashan. Made you a new chart. Okay, here's our wine. Now it's on a second chart, the exact same chart for the wine. For wine, I have charuvin. So the same, you can look at it if you want to. I'll just give you a chance. You can pause and look at it if you want to, but you get the point. Same chart, but our question is, what about charuvin of Sheviit? If I'm using the charuvim in order to flavor the wine. So I have charuvim in the yayin of Shishit. Does it leave a flavor? And the yayin of Shminit. Interestingly enough, so the Mishnah says, charuvim chadashim shekafsham b'yayin yashan. Whether, like the same case, I have 7th year charuvim in 6th year oil, in 6th year wine, or Yeshanim b'chadash, or 7th year charuvim in 8th year oil, chayavim b'biur. In this case, the Mishnah says chayav b'biur, no matter what. Now, the Kahati says there's 2 ways to understand this. The Kahati says chayav b'biur because no matter what, charuv is strong. It's no tain tam, it leaves a strong tam. The Bartanura disagrees. I just quoted you this chayav b'biur, whether it's set in the 7th year charuvim, whether it's in yayin of Shishit or Sheminit, chayav b'biur. Bartanura says this chayav b'biur is lav davka. It's only talking about after the zman biur, after the time came that it's no longer. It's after the time came where there's no longer wine of Sheviit, no longer grapes in the field. You have to do biur. You have to get rid of it. But before zman biur, you can take out the charuvim, okay, and there's no Kedushat Sheviit. He says it's similar that these 2 halachot are similar. That just like the rule is yilaket et havered in the case of the roses, similarly you can yilaket et charuvim in the case of the wine. But the Rambam argues, the Rambam is cholek, the Rambam says no. The Mishnah comes along to tell us that there's a different rule for charuvim in wine than there is for rose petals in oil. Okay, you can look it up if you want. That's the Bartanura's different explanation. Now the Mishnah goes on and says there's a rule. Zeh klal. This is the rule. Kol shehu b'notein tam, if the Shviit is notein tam, it creates a taste. You can still taste it. It's still recognizable in some either Shviit or Shminit. Chayav levaer. Then you have to do biur. Then when the Shviit is no longer there, when the rose petals are no longer in the field, then you have to do biur, because if there's a strong tam in the oil, you have to get rid of it. You have to get rid of it. You have to do biur like you do with all the Kedushat Sheviit. Min b'she'eno mino. That's only min b'she'eno mino. Example of min b'she'eno mino is roses in our oil, or pineapple in wine, etc., etc. But min b'mino, let's say it's min b'mino. Let's say I mix a little of Shvini olive oil, but in it I got Shviit olive oil. Says the Mishnah, kol shehu. Why? Any amount. If I have any amount of Shviit olive oil in Shminit olive oil, kol shehu, it has to be treated like Kedushat Sheviit. But Shviit oseret kol shehu. The rule is Shviit is oser, because it's oser in any amount, b'mina, in its min, i.e. olive oil in olive oil, v'shelo b'mina, but if it's not b'mina, like we said, like the charuvim in the wine, or the verid in the rose in the oil, b'notein tam. Then it's b'notein tam, which we said is shishim, is 1/60th. Now, the Rambam says, interestingly enough, how do we pass in? So if you look at this is the Machon Haaretz, but the Torah Haaretz. Okay, they were asked a question, okay, about, right, they had a bad and they mixed in accidentally in their olive press. Some was Shviit oil, but a majority was not Shviit oil. And how did you have to deal with it? So let's just look at the Rambam for a second. You try to make it bigger. There we go. Okay, let's look at he quotes the Rambam. He says, the Rambam quotes the halacha. Charuvim shel Shviit. This is from our Mishnah. Charuv Shviit shekavsham b'yayin shishit o b'yayin motzei Shviit. Whether it's in this is what the Rambam disagrees with the Bartanura, whether it's in 6th year wine or 8th year wine, chayav levar yayin, when there's no longer any chuvim, you got to get rid of the wine. Sharei tam peirot shviit bo, because there's tam of shviit in it. Zaklal, this is the rule. Peirot shviit shinidaru bepeirot acherot min b'mino. If it's min b'mino, b'chol shu, it's any amount. B'shelo b'mino b'notein tam, and if it's not b'mino, it's b'notein tam. Now I just want to say that's the pasuk of the Rambam. You can read on if you want to. I'll just give you the address here. Okay, you can read on in this address if you really want to. It's the whole. This is beyond the scope of our discussion. But the Rambam paskins according to the Mishnah halacha l'maaseh. Whereas the Bartanura, if you look carefully, the Bartanura says, where can I find it? Okay, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the Bartanura here in Kol Shehu. I'm sorry, Ze'aklal. This is the rule. B'chol yisurim shebetorah. We're talking about in all these surim. Debekulan b'mino b'mashu, min b'mino b'mashu, umin b'she'eno mina b'notein tam ve'eno halacha. The Bartanura says this is according to a Tana that says in all dinim in the Torah that min b'mino is batel b'mashu. We don't paskin like that. The Rambam says no. This is a rule only for Shemitah, and we do paskin like this for Shemitah. In general, the rule is much more complicated. We'll get to it when we get to Chulin and Ta'arovit. Min b'mino. is batel berov, is batel in the majority if it's not recognizable because you can't taste the isur. Shelo b'mino is b'notein tam. That's the deoraita rule. We paskin bar machmer b'shishim. We'll get to it. And nonetheless, we see that the Rambam says in this case, he's quoting the Mishnah, Sheviit oseret kolshu b'mina. It's a rule specifically for Sheviit. And not like the Bartanura says it's a rule in general, and we don't paskin like that. We will stop here. If you have any comments or questions, as always, feel free to contact me at arspolter@gmail.com. We'll dedicate this Mishnah learning to the memory of my father, Rav Simcha ben Yitzchak Kalman. Have a great day.